Maybe flat Earth. 10 reasons why I believe in the flat Earth. The horizon always appears completely flat, 360 degrees to the observer. Regardless of how high you go up, any curvature that you think you see is from curved aeroplane windows or GoPro cameras and fisheye lenses. The reality is that the horizon never curves because we are on an endless plane. On a globe with 25,000 miles in circumference, you would see a noticeable disappearance of objects the further they are, as they would be leaning away from you and dropping below the constantly curving horizon. Imagine being stood on a giant orange and walking over it. You would eventually go around it. The horizon always rises to meet your eye level, no matter how high in altitude you go. Even at 20 miles up, the horizon rises to meet the observer or the camera. This is only physically possible if the Earth is a huge, endless flat plane. If it were a globe, no matter how large, as you ascended, the horizon would stay fixed and the observer, the camera, would have to tilt downward, looking down further and further to see it. Now, the natural physics of water is to find and maintain its level. If the Earth were a giant spinning sphere, tilting and hurtling through space, then truly flat, consistent, level water surfaces would not exist here. There would be a massive bulge of water in the oceans because of the curvature of the Earth, and if the Earth was curved and spinning, the oceans of water would be flowing down to a level and covering land. Some rivers would be impossibly flowing uphill. There would be massive water chaos and flooding. What we would see and experience would be vastly different. But since the Earth is in fact an extended plane, it's flat, the fundamental physics property of fluids finding and remaining level is consistent with experience and common sense. The water remains flat because the Earth is flat. So, if the Earth was a globe, a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, as NASA and all the other modern astronomers claim, and half the people here on the internet, or 99% of them, spherical trigonometry dictates the surface of all standing water must curve downward and easily measurable 8 inches per mile multiplied by the square of the distance. So this means along a 6-mile channel of standing water, the Earth would dip 6 feet on either end from the central peak. Every time such experiments have been conducted, standing water is always flat and nothing, absolutely nothing, dips over the horizon. The Sun is also a hell of a lot closer than we've been told. It is in fact in our atmosphere. You can clearly see that it is not 93 million miles away. Many times you can see the sun rays shooting out of a cloud forming a triangle, funny enough. If you follow the rays to the source, it will lead you to a place above the clouds, and if the sun was truly millions of miles away, all the rays would actually come in at a straight angle. Also, the sun can be seen, as you can show you now, directly above the clouds, actually creating a hotspot on the clouds, clearly not 93 million miles away. The sun looks close because it is close. It's really that simple. The sun rays will show you from a direct point of view, they do not travel at ridiculous light speeds. So if the globe really is spinning at 1,000 miles at the equator, then aeroplanes would constantly have to dip their noses down every few minutes to compensate for the curve of the Earth. So remember, with a circumference of 25,000 miles, it would constantly be curving at the speed of an aeroplane, like over 500 miles an hour. But in reality, they never do it. They learn how to fly based on a level, flat plane. Also, if the Earth was spinning, the aeroplanes going west would get to their destination much faster, since the Earth is spinning in the opposite direction. So if the atmosphere is spinning with the Earth, then the aeroplanes flying west would have to fly faster than the Earth's spin to reach its destination. In reality, the Earth is flat and aeroplanes just fly level and reach their destination easily because the Earth is not moving. They use an artificial horizon that's based on a gyroscope, which also proves the flat Earth. So with gravity, bear in mind still very much a theory, is really a force strong enough to hold the world's oceans, buildings and people, atmosphere stuck to the surface of a spinning ball, then it is impossible for gravity to also simultaneously be weak enough to allow little birds and insects and planes to take off and travel freely, unabated in any direction. If gravity is strong enough to curb the massive expanse of oceans around our global Earth, then it would be impossible for fish and other creatures to swim through forcefully held water. If you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it well enough, and even he couldn't. Yet Nikola tells her today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality whatsoever. As we know, because gravity is magic. A simple way to explain gravity is through density and mass, and if you add water into the equation, then you're looking at buoyancy. But when you put water to a spinning ball, it falls off. Try it yourself. There has never been one single experiment that has ever proven water to ever stick or curve around a ball. Ship or boat captains navigating great distances at sea never need to factor the supposed curvature of the Earth into their calculations either. Both plain sailing and great circle sailing, the most popular navigation methods, use simple plain, not spherical trigonometry, making all mathematical calculations on the assumption that the Earth is perfectly flat. If the Earth was in fact a sphere, such an assumption would lead to constant glaring inaccuracies. So plain sailing has worked perfectly fine in both theory and practice for thousands and thousands of years. However, plain trigonometry has time again proven more accurate than spherical trigonometry in determining distances across the oceans. So if the Earth was truly a globe, then every line of latitude south of the equator would have to measure a gradually smaller and smaller circumference the farther south travelled. So if the Earth is indeed an extended plane, then every line of latitude south of the equator should measure a gradually larger and larger circumference the farther south travelled. The fact that many captains navigating south of the equator, assuming that globular theory, have found themselves drastically out of reckoning, more so the farther south travelled. So it testifies the fact that the Earth is indeed flat and it is not a ball. Contrary to what many of the globular people that we talk to still believe, this is what we believe, not the fact that we don't fall off the edge because we are surrounded by a complete 360-degree ice wall, which is what we call Antarctica. Magellan, Captain Cook, Columbus, very simple, circumnavigated the flat plane travelling east. East, 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 east. Very simple, very straightforward, does not need to be on a globular ball to circumnavigate a flat plane. The Believer, the Rowbotham and the current azimuthal equidistant map with the United Nations, the olive branch, sort of symbolising Antarctica as well, and the ice wall, and the hidden powers, the elite, the Freemasons with the olive branch around it, and also the Grandmaster, sort of their hidden knowledge to what surrounds us. Airy's failure is an experiment that proves that stars move relative to the stationary Earth and not the other way around. By first filling a telescope with water to slow down the speed of light inside, then calculating the tilt necessary to get the starlight directly down the tube. Airy failed to prove the heliocentric theory since the starlight was already coming in at the correct angle with no change necessary, and therefore proved the geocentric model correct. And also you've got the Michelson-Morley and Sagnac experiments, attempting to measure the change in speed of light due to the Earth's assumed motion through space. After measuring it in every possible different direction in various locations, they failed to even detect any significant change whatsoever, again proving the stationary geocentric model. Flat Earth phenomenon is here. The New World Order was yesterday. Satellites in space, if you Google any single image whatsoever regarding a satellite, you'll notice they're all CGIs. Who took that photograph? It's a great question when people ask you about the MEMS. And if there are thousands of satellites in space, then why is the US military relying on blimps to defend against missile attacks? Signals are reflected or deflected off the lower atmosphere from tower to tower, which just leaves me with a very interesting quote from the head of NASA, Wernher von Braun, regarding the firmament. And these are all the beautiful different scriptures in the Bible mentioning the firmament and God's handiwork. Words are, of course, the most powerful drug used by mankind. Rudyard Kipling. The Egyptian, the Norse, the Hindu, the Mayan, the Inca, the Navajo, the Hebrew visions of the firmament. How many of you can see the subliminal message? I'll give you a hint, it's in the NASA photo. The Creator created you, a biological masterpiece, just like the beautiful flat stationary motionless plane we live on. It is a magical book of history, his story. There really is only two sides to choose from. I know which side I'm on. Do you? The flat earth reality is what your eyes actually see. It takes more than a few minutes of research to undo a lifetime of indoctrination. This was the Divine Code. Me be Flat Earth, thank you very much for watching. Please tap that subscribe for more, and I just want to send a little message to all my subscribers. You guys please be lucky and have a fantastic day.